Tenyi and Lu Yu fell into a grave situation after Zhen entered the despair dream. Zhen left so suddenly and Xian began attacking them at the same instant. If it weren't for the dragon's hard necklace, the first round of fire would have shot Tenyi into a beehive. Not so lucky for Lu Yu on the other hand. The needle-like gauze bullets pierced his arm and disabled it. Xian possessed the same two gauze pistols, but he did not have the fighting capacity of real Xian. There was no gun kata, no lambda driver, and not even the most basic genetic constraint unlock. All he had offensively were the gauze pistols. Otherwise, Tenyi and Lu Yu wouldn't have the chance to escape. In the first round of fires, a barrier protected Tenyi from the bullets. However, it was only a matter of time before the barrier ran out of energy. Tenyi's eyes defocused all of a sudden. He flipped the dining table to obstruct Xian's vision. Then he picked up Lu Yu and ran toward the hallway. The sound of gunfire chased after them non-stop, but Xian, without being in the unlock mode, could not catch up to him. He escaped with Lu Yu by a hair. Can't run. You can't run, haha. Let me kill you just like how I killed those other people. Let me kill you. Don't run. A man wearing a black hat and striped shirt appeared next to Xian as he came into the hallway. The man's face was burned. He wore a pair of scissor-like gloves. The attire looked queer yet terrifying. He followed after Xian and chased the two people. They said the dragon's hard necklace can't block too many attacks. Its energy reserve is limited. Xian's weapons are also powerful. I don't know how much energy it has left. I also need to stop Lu Yu's arm from bleeding Zhen. Which part of Freddy is as weak as you described? He's way more dangerous. You couldn't completely blame Zhen because the Xian was pretty much harmless against him. Xian's strength lay in his wit, secondly his items, and lastly was his fighting capacity. Even so, the real Xian could have killed Tenyi and Lu Yu several times already. Tenyi's fault was his lack of strength. Tenyi's innate talents were lacking, but he bathed in dragon blood and was injected with the T-virus after all. He also unlocked the first stage of the genetic constraint. So, even though he might be weaker than Alice from Resident Evil, he still ran faster than Xian and Freddy when he carried an extra person. Can't stay in the house. Run to the streets. Tenyi headed toward the streets. He did not see any pedestrians on the way. The whole section was empty under bright daylight. It felt as though no one lived in this town. The quietness could drive people crazy, but this was not Tenyi's concern at the moment. Lu Yu. Stay strong. I will stop your bleeding with the hemostasis spray after we found a place to hide. Tenyi yelled. Lu Yu's face looked bloodless. He shook his head. Don't stop. If this is a dream, there is no distance constraint. Freddy can't catch up to you because you have the thought of running. If you stop running, they will quickly find us. That's how the monsters catch you in a dream. So don't stop. Tenyi was surprised. His step slowed down slightly as he tried to respond to Lu Yu. However, the sound of gunshots came again. Xian and Freddy had catch up before they knew it. Freddy yelled in laughter, run. Run from me. Your leader's heart is shattering. The stronger your fear, anger, and despair grows, the more powerful I get. Haha. Once Zhengzha's heart shattered, I will be able to completely emulate Chu Xian's powers. Killing you will be a piece of cake. Run. Keep running. Somehow, the shots coming out from Xian had become more accurate. He began to take on a crude form of gun kata. Tenyi had seen Xian use gun kata and lambda driver in training. So this sight shocked him. He hurried his steps. Yet, no matter how fast he ran, Xian and Freddy simply trailed after them. The barrier was getting thinner and on the verge of shattering. So were the lives of these two people. Neither time nor space existed in a dream. It all depended upon whether the person could see through himself. Hung felt his heart had broken apart as Yan Wei and the criminals got further and further away. He didn't even notice the corpse laying beside him had turned into Freddy. He stood in place quietly. Valuable fragments of memories replayed through his head like a movie, when he was a baby, a boy, a teen, an adult, yet it felt as though something important had been missing in his life. What was it? What have I forgotten? Yan Wei, I still remember her. I hurt her. I failed her trust. Mother, I could never forget the warmth of mother. Father, he caused this for me, but he was also having a difficult life. I don't blame him. Those criminals, their faces are forever carved within my heart. I can never forget them no matter how many times I killed them. What was it that I have forgotten? Hung stood there motionless. His eyes had lost the shine of life. He did not move as Freddy closed in on him. They said when a person dies, his life will replay in his head. Is it the time for me to die? Yes. My time should be up. I am sorry to her. I ruined her life. And I ruined my life. Do humans have a next life? I want to say to her, I am sorry. Will there be a next life? I will to meet with Zheng and everyone once more. Will there be a next life? But what is it that I have forgotten? What did I forget? Hung's heart had broken down. He lost even the desire to live on. The only thing left behind was this tiny question. It was the only difference he had from a dead person. Freddy raised his gloved hand. It reached for Hung's heart. What have I forgotten? Something very important. If I can live life again. His memories rewinded back to his childhood, when he was still very small, when his parents were still alive, when he was still friends with Yan Wei. Back then, he had. That one time they were naughty and played with his father's bow. An arrow nearly shot into Yan Wei's eye. Hung pushed her out of the way and the arrow pierced his leg. He was still very young, but he comforted her with a smile while she cried, paying no attention to the blood bleeding from his leg. That was courage. Hung shouted. Freddy was shocked by the sudden change. He attempted to jump away, but Hung seized his shoulder and pulled him inward. Hung kicked Freddy on the heel and flipped his whole body over. His other hand had grabbed the hold of a silver bow. Hung placed the bow beneath where Freddy was falling. He yanked the bow upward. The bowstring sliced Freddy's head off. Courage. If I am wrong, then I am wrong. There's no running away forever. Yanwei, I will repay you with the rest of my life. If that isn't enough, we will go to hell and I will repay you with an eternity. I will never run again. I don't ever want to run again. Hung charged at the car that was driving further and further away in madness. Somehow, he caught up such long distance in just several steps. He fired a series of arrows. The men fell to the ground without uttering a sound. Hung turned to Yanwei in her ripped clothes and shouted. I will revive you after I return. I won't run again. Never again in my life. The suffering from my childhood isn't an excuse. I will let go of what should be let go. In the future, if we have a future, I will repay you with my life. He shut his eyes. The next time he opened his eyes, he was standing on the street that he vanished from. There was no more Yanwei or the other men. The dimension was in a complete silence, as though everything that had happened was an illusion. Hung's eyes looked more resolute than he had ever shown. There was no sign of weakness. It felt as though this was the true him. Just then, he heard a series of gunshots from the distance. Hung was surprised for a moment, then began to rush over. After running through several streets, he saw Xian and Freddy chasing after Tenyi. Freddy, what are you trying to do? Hung drew his bow to a full moon. The single arrow on the bow exerted an overwhelming amount of pressure. Freddy, what are you trying to do to my comrade? Hung's appearance was so sudden and his shout drew everyone's attention. Tenyi's mind froze for a moment when he saw Hung, like he was asking who was this man? That only lasted for 2 seconds before something struck his mind and he yelled, Hung. You are Hung. Help me. Hurry. Hung was confused at Tenyi's words. Why did this Tenyi seem like they didn't know each other? Or that he had just remembered him? But there was no time to ponder because the dragon's hard barrier only blocked attacks from technological weapons and not Freddy's gloved hand. Hung saw Freddy reaching out his glove to kill Tenyi. Only a few steps distance separated the two. Those scissors would pierce into Tenyi's back in at most 2 seconds. Fuck you. Hung yelled. Light radiated from Hung's hands and reflected off the silver bow. The +4 enchanted arrow transformed into a strand of light. Time seemed to have stopped at this instant. The only object that moved was the strand of light which flashed across and pierced Freddy from the left to right shoulder. His body began to disintegrate at the wound and soon, Freddy disappeared among the wind as particles. The light continued to penetrate into a building far in the distance and crushed its wall. The flow of time returned. The remains of Freddy's clothes finally began to fall from air. This shot could rival Zero Snipe through the mystic eyes of death perception. It did not have the unique characteristic of ignoring defense, but ordinary defenses were no match for this shot. Its speed, accuracy, and power put the shot among the top-tier abilities. Lightning shot. The upgrade of the Elven bloodline transformed charged shot into lightning shot. It indeed seemed like Hung released a bolt of lightning. Perhaps due to Hung's ascension in the soul, he did not collapse after firing. He placed 2 arrows on the bow and aimed them at Xian. Tenyi. Hung yelled, his eyes fixed on Xian. What happened? Why are Xian and Freddy chasing you? Tenyi was panting heavily. Xian stopped in place after Hung fired that shot. He crossed the gauze pistols in front of his body and stopped moving. Seeing Xian stopped attacking, Tenyi ran into a shop and yelled, Hung. This Xian is fake. Freddy would not drag the real Xian into this dream world. Zheng attempted to attack Xian but he disappeared. Freddy also said the heavier Zheng's break down, the stronger Xian becomes. Hurry up and attack him. Hung hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should believe Tenyi. Even though Xian attacked Tenyi along with Freddy, who knew if this was his scheme? Hung had worked with Xian long enough that he believed if there was someone who could turn Freddy into a teammate, it was Xian. Xian did not give Hung the time to think. He slowly aimed the pistols at Tenyi and Hung. Then his hands rotated in an extremely fast speed. The gauze bullets struck 2 translucent barriers. Xian's speed and accuracy had increased greatly. This form was more than simply shooting. It was the form of gun kata that Xian created. The bullets drowned out the 2 people's thoughts. Hung's dragon's heart was still at full energy. But not so for Tenyi. He slipped into another shop and yelled, Hung. What should we do? The gap in Zheng's heart is widening. Xian's going to use Lambda Driver if it continues. Hung felt a shiver within. He had witnessed Xian use gun kata and Lambda Driver in training, and he also heard Zheng describe Xian's showcasing in Transformers. Someone who could kill his way through powerful robots could slaughter him and Tenyi in an instant. Without hesitation, Hung fired the 2-arrow explosive shot at Xian. Xian's eyes had defocused. It was an obvious sign of entering the unlock mode. Just as the 2 arrows neared each other, the gauze pistol bullets struck the arrows. Pop pop. The arrows shattered before they collided. The strength of gun kata lay in creating a circular zone surrounding the user. Xian had calculated every possible trajectory of attacks. As long as his hands continued moving, all attacks would be stopped by the gauze pistol bullets. The only exception was when those attacks were much more powerful than the bullets or were immune. Everything else would be shot down before reaching Xian. Hung nearly bit his tongue. He yelled to Tenyi, "Run further away. I will delay him." What did Zheng say before he disappeared? Tenyi ran to the back door of the shop. Zheng said, "Everyone's lives are in my hands." He said, "My body is physically stronger than Freddy and wanted me to kill him." His voice was growing further and further away. Hung also hid behind a wall. However, the gauze pistol bullets shot through the wall and hit him. In the end, he had no choice but to lay on the ground. Hung pondered over what Tenyi had just said and muttered, "That means we have to kill this Xian that the demon transformed into." And the more the gap in Zheng's heart widens, the more Xian's strength approaches the real Xian. Interesting. Give me 5 minutes. I will be able to use another lightning shot. I will decide the battle with it. On the other hand, Tenyi carried Lu Yu out through the shop's back door. He immediately brought out the hemostasis spray. While carrying Lu Yu with one hand, he sprayed the wounds with the other hand. This action naturally slowed his steps. Suddenly, something quickly moved before his eyes. A sharp pain registered from his left chest before he could react. Tenyi fell forward onto the street. A man wearing a striped shirt and hat was standing by the alley he just fell out from. He was the same Freddy who Hung just pierced with an arrow. Yet, he appeared completely intact. Freddy licked the blood from his hand and looked toward Tenyi with a wicked smile. He slit his up Tenyi's chest when he just stepped out from the alley. The 5 scissor blades sliced into Tenyi's chest. Tenyi was now lying on the street with Lu Yu. The wounds cut deep into his left chest. Blood gushed out from his mouth as he was unable to move. Freddy chuckled in a taunting manner. "It's unfortunate for you. As long as my main body remains in this dream, I will come back with no limitation. Furthermore, my number increases as the gap in Zhengzha's heart widens. I will also possess greater and greater power. Can you still run away from me?" Haha. Freddy snapped his finger. A truck armored with steel spikes drove toward them from the distance. By the looks of it, just a scrape on the side would take away half Tenyi's life. Not to mention the truck was driving directly at him. Tenyi was still conscious despite he was coughing blood. He stared at the truck helplessly. Despair overtook him. What is filial piety? What is loyalty? Wang Xia wept loudly as he stared at his mother's memorial tablet. Blood flowed down his forehead and covered his face. His heart felt painful and lost. He was at a loss with regard to his duty, to everything he had done, and of his existence. He was aware this was a dream and everything was probably an illusion. But he still felt lost. The truth of the event didn't matter anymore because his belief was shaken. Wang Xia let the claw behind him reach close without paying any attention to it. No. As the claw was going to pierce his head, Wang Xia suddenly moved to the side. The claw only hit his shoulder. Freddy asked in a surprise, "No to what?" "A man can still be a hero even if he bends his knees. My grandfather was a soldier. My father was a soldier. I am a soldier. I might not be able to see my mother go, but I will bring back to the real world the technologies, knowledge, and powers from God's realm. I will place them in front of her grave and tell her, 'Your son did not disappoint you. Your son is also a hero.'" Wang Xia turned his head around. Blood slid down his forehead into his eyes. Those eyes looked red as blood. The truck was coming nearer and near to Tenyi as despair filled him. Yet, he could not even turn his body. He would not have a complete piece of flesh left once the truck ran over him. 70 meters left between the truck and Tenyi and Lu Yu. A bolt of plasma suddenly dropped from the sky and enveloped the truck in a pillar of electricity. It was only a moment before Tenyi and Liu Yu's minds caught up to what was happening, and the truck had already been liquefied. The pillar disappeared, leaving behind only the intense heat from the plasma explosion. Tenyi and Lu Yu stared ahead, dazzled. A man walked out from an alley. He was holding a human head on his hand. The human head was yelling, but he ignored the noise. After he came near Tenyi and Lu Yu, he threw the head over to Freddy. Smoke was rising from the head as though it was fried in whole. Wang Xia said in a cool tone, "I returned from your nightmare. How much longer are you going to play with a person's heart?" He ended in a shout. Demon energy filled his hands as he waved them in the air. Winged bombs materialized beside him. These bombs had little hands that each carried a plasma grenade. The winged bomb surrounded Freddy and closed in on him before he could escape. Plasma discharged at all directions. Wang Xia was extremely furious, but he did not lose his rationality completely. When the winged bomb surrounded Freddy, he grabbed Tenyi and Lu Yu and ran. A heat wave flew at them after he had only ran a few meters. The heat wave chased their backs until Wang Xia ran 100 meters away. He could feel his hair being fried. The three turned around to see a huge hole of 20 meters in diameter left by the explosion. Freddy was burned to nothingness. Amazing. Tenyi and Lu Yu thought. Wang Xia was not the center of attention in Team China and barely had any showings. Little did they know that he possessed such powers. The plasma explosion looked more impressive than even Zheng's strength and burned Freddy in an instant. They would be safe with him here. Wang Xia's steps began to lose stability. He stopped after running 300 meters and panted heavily. At the same time, he brought out the hemostasis spray to stop the bleeding on the other two. Once he was done, he dropped to the ground like he had just finished a marathon. The exhaustion nearly knocked him out. However, the situation did not permit it happening. Wang Xia immediately inquired the others. Tenyi was lucky that the blades did not cut through his heart. He was still coughing out blood, but he managed to stay alive. He narrated what had happened after Wang Xia disappeared. Hung held Xian back, so I got a chance to run here with Lu Yu. But Freddy did not let us go. Based on what he said, he could revive endlessly as long as the fake Xian is still alive. Furthermore, as the gap in Zheng's heart widens, his power and number will grow. The fake Xian will also become closer to the real Xian. I don't know how many of him we will have to fight if the situation continues. Tenyi sighed. Wang Xia paused for a moment. You two look for a place to hide. Don't run aimlessly. I go help Hung kill the fake Xian. If he reaches the power of real Xian, we will die to the lambda driver. So we have to kill him before he gets to that point. Wang Xia got up. Don't leave. Lu Yu grabbed Wang Xia's shirt. Our lives are also the key. If this is a dream, then someone has to be dreaming to maintain the world. Furthermore, everyone aside from us has been dragged into the despair dream. If we die, there will be no one maintaining the safe dream and no one will wake up. Tenyi and Wang Xia both responded, for real. Mostly. Lu Yu did not let go of Wang Xia. I mentioned I read a lot of books. I read all kinds of books since I was bored being locked at home. A few of them were about dreams. Like when you can't distinguish a dream from reality, death in a dream will be death in reality. And then there are two things you need to dream, the dreamer and a message. If the fake Xian is Freddy, then he's the message and we are the dreamer. Tenyi and I are the only ones keeping this dream going after the other have been into the despair dream. Wang Xia and Tenyi gave him a glance of surprise, then each grabbed one of his arms and ran. I don't understand what you just said, but you looked like Xian and Honglu when they spoke of things we don't understand. So we are better off believing you. Wang Xia said. Tenyi nodded in agreement. Lu Yu didn't get why the two of them suddenly chose to believe him. However, it was good that his life was safe for now. He asked, Tenyi, how's the wound on your chest? It looked very deep a while ago. Tenyi coughed but without blood this time. He gave Lu Yu a bitter smile. You can be like me soon. Once you return to God's dimension, you will get a chance to bathe in dragon blood. It will enhance your body to twice as strong as a normal person. Recovery rate will also become insanely high, though not as high as Zheng's. Lu Yu nodded. What about Hung? Did he also bathe in dragon blood? Can he beat Xian? Wang Xia and Tenyi looked to each other without a word. After a while, Wang Xia finally replied, if the fake Xian really reaches the power of real Xian like Freddy said, none of us has the confidence to take him out. Xian's strength is unfathomable even without his intelligence. Our lives lie in your hand, Hung. Hung did not have the same thought as the other three. He was barely staying alive, not to mention protecting the rest of the team. Xian had entered the second stage of the unlocked mode. His movement speed, reaction speed, and strength all surpassed Hung's. The gun kata did not give Hung a break. The dragon's hard barrier rippled non-stop. Neither the 2-arrow nor 3-arrow explosive shot could get through Xian's gun kata. Hung also tried to use the silver bow's volley ability, but Xian dodged them each time. Before long, he was getting the only one getting hit. The lightning shot needs 3 more minutes. Its power should be able to kill this fake Xian, I hope. He has always only displayed his wit. No one expected him to be so freaking strong in combat. Is this really the real Xian's strength? He hasn't even used Lambda Driver yet. Sometimes you just never realized how strong someone was when they were near you. However, this realization set in once they became an enemy. Xian chased Hung for 2 blocks. The dragon's hard necklace had almost depleted at this point. Hung entered an alley, then ran through a back door. It was the back of a bar. Hung ran straight for the front door, but as the door opened, 2 pitch black muzzles awaited him. Xian was standing in front. The dragon's heart only had enough energy to block a few more shots. Cheng Xiao charged toward the entrance of the bar in a rage when he saw the love of his life exited the bar with a man. He smashed the door with a kick. The man and woman had gone far away in the distance. There was nothing he could do as he watched the woman he loved disappear, as a prostitute taken away by another man. Don't choke me. Do you know why I came out? Because she was called a prostitute? Or because I saw someone took her away? Hell no. It's because I want to kill you. And to tell you of a truth. Cheng Xiao shouted. I don't deny I am horny, so I can't bear being betrayed by the woman I love, neither physically nor mentally. This is indeed my biggest weakness. But love exists because of trust. Don't you think you can fool me with illusions? Don't you think you can make me doubt her and harm her? I believe my love with my life. Hung sighed at the gun. He let out a bitter smile and said, I used to be scared of dying, but I really wanted to die. Now that I am not scared of dying, I don't want to die. How ironic. He closed his eyes. The fake Xian moved like the real Xian in every minute detail. He slowly raised the gun. As he was about to pull the trigger, a man appeared out of thin air between the two of them. It was so unexpected that both Hung and Xian were taken aback, and so was the person who appeared. Then Xian pulled the trigger. A series of tat-tat-tat sounds echoed, but the man's head wasn't smashed as expected. A rippling barrier popped up by his head and blocked the bullets. Cheng Xiao shouted, You mad? I am Cheng Xiao? Did you forget who I am? Hung saw Cheng Xiao was about to step away and yelled, Don't move. My dragon's heart is out of energy. This Xian is fake. He isn't the real Xian. He's a copy Freddy created from Zheng's mind. Several needle bullets flew by the sides of Cheng Xiao and hit Hung's barrier. It scared him so much he immediately moved up to Cheng Xiao's back. Cheng Xiao grabbed the gauze pistol, but he didn't attack without a clear idea of what was happening. Xian reacted beyond his expectation. He rotated his hand out from Cheng Xiao's grab and pushed him off. The other gauze pistol was placed by on Changxiao's temple. Another round of fire followed. Despite the barrier, the force from the bullets knocked Changxiao over. Xian aimed both pistols at Hung again. Hung complained to himself that how could Xian's gun kata even beat Changxiao, who knew martial art. Changxiao had entered the unlock mode the moment he lost balance. He landed with one hand on the ground and propelled himself back up. His fists punched Xian on the abdomen one after another, not giving Xian a chance to breathe. He's not Xian. Xian's gun kata is way stronger than this. Changxiao shouted. Hung thought to himself how strong was the real Xian when the fake one was already so strong. And then he received a kick from Changxiao which sent him straight into the bar. Hung nearly threw up after the kick despite Changxiao controlled its force. Gunshots sounded from outside the bar. Its door and windows were shattered. Hung looked out from a gap and saw Changxiao's fists repeatedly aimed for Xian. Yet, the gauze pistols stopped their advances each time. Changxiao did not get any hit in while Xian shot back at his fists and their barrier. Changxiao did practice martial art. However, he was much more interested in medicine and Gu in comparison, so he never got to learn the profound martial arts. He only knew of one better boxing technique. Xian mentioned gun kata operates on the calculation of vast data of close and long-range combat. It calculates every possible direction of incoming attacks. So I can either attack him from a direction that isn't supposed to initiate an attack, which wouldn't cause much damage even if the attacks hit, or go for his fatal spot and pierce his defense with power and speed. Once Changxiao made up his mind, he kicked toward Xian. The pistols fired at him and with the force from the shots, he leaped into the bar. He put on the rank B gloves while he was still in the air. The moment he landed on a table, he leaped at the entrance again. Xian just ran through the entrance. His gun kata proficiency had been rising steadily. Its speed and accuracy were almost at the same level as real Xian, which evidenced the convergence of his power to the real Xian and Zheng's collapse. Orbital Taiji. Changxiao charged up to Xian the instant Xian stepped into the bar. His steps moved in an interwinding pattern. Changxiao punched Xian on the shoulder with far greater force and speed that he had shown. Xian's pistol did not move into block on time. Great. Changxiao said to himself. He revolved around Xian while his fists struck in a flurry as though they were stuck together. Never once did their distance grew further than 30 centimeters. At the final strike, Changxiao punched Xian on the chin and knocked him back out of the bar. Nice. Hung yelled. He held the silver bow in preparation to run out. However, Changxiao grabbed his shoulder and dragged him in the opposition direction. He was panting heavily. Hung asked while they ran, "What are you doing?" "We should shoot him while he's down." Changxiao showed Hung his fist. Its skin was cracked as if Changxiao had punched a piece of steel. Even punching steel wouldn't injure it so much given his physical capability. Hung was confused. Changxiao explained, "That last hit felt abnormal." "Yes, it was like I hit an impenetrable barrier or something." "He has gained the Lambda driver. Not the complete version, but it has begun." The two rushed out from the back door. A peculiar wave occurred behind them and then the whole bar collapsed. If they were 1 second late, they would be buried under the building now. Shit. That's overpowered. Why did I never feel the psychopath is this strong? And he only showed it when he's an enemy. Hung and Changxiao nearly bit their tongues. They met eyes with each other then simultaneously began running. Neither person wanted to fight Xian again. Hung. Where's your charged shot? Kill that psychopath. Freaking. What is he trying to become, a humanoid machine instead of a strategist? Changxiao shouted. Hung counted the time then replied, "It's not charged shot. I can use the more powerful lightning shot, but in 2 more minutes I don't want to die." 2 more minutes? Can we make it through 2 more minutes? No one, not even the two of them, knew if they could survive for 2 more minutes. Though on the other side, Wang Xia, Ten Yi, and Lu Yu might not even make it through 30 more seconds. Freddy's strength seemed to have really grown. After being killed twice by Wang Xia and Hung, the sound of running engine echoed from the distance within 10 seconds. Wang Xia, Ten Yi, and Lu Yu looked out to see 3 demolition trucks driving toward them. Inside each truck was a Freddy. The one in the frontmost truck held out his head and laughed madly. Ten Yi and Lu Yu both looked to Wang Xia, who instantly yelled, "Run. I have nearly used up all my demon energy just then. I only exchanged the early enhancement for Bomb Dominator. I was triggered when I saw Freddy and used up my demon energy at once. It will take at least 1 to 2 minutes to recover some. Hurry and run." He picked up Lu Yu and headed the way. Ten Yi was shocked for a moment before he followed after Wang Xia. The 3 people entered a narrow alley. They did not dare to run on the wide streets due to the trucks. After they had run some distance, they could hear the sound of buildings collapsing coming from behind. The trucks drove after them into the alley and crushed every building on their way. This slowed down their speed, but they were not letting the 3 people get away. Strangely, even though the 3 were running toward the busiest area of the town where the streets should be laid out in more complex designs and buildings should be taller and more densely packed, that was the exact opposite of what they were seeing. The views became emptier as they ran. They increased their pace since turning back was the same as running up to death. They had no other choice but to follow along the path they had chosen to the end. The only thing they could do was run faster. Something's not right. This is near where our house was at. It's an empty land surrounding our house. Wang Xia suddenly cried. The other 2 also got a clear view of the surrounding. They saw the house they lived in not far away. No one knew what tricks Freddy played on them to pull them back to this place. There was nowhere to hide. The trucks were driving closer and closer. The only place they could run to was back into the house, even though they knew it was difficult to run away once inside. The trucks behind weren't giving them any other choice. They were coming at a speed similar to regular sedans. 20 meters left. 10 meters. On the near truck, its crane swung a wrecking ball at the three people. While Wang Xia, Ten Yi, and Lu Yu were in danger, a new circumstance developed between Yin Kong and Zui Kong. The despair dream and the safe dream were merely separated by a thought. If one could see through the illusions that shrouded their mind, then they could jump out of the despair dream or gain control of it, turning Freddy into their marionette. However, someone who could achieve this feat would have ascended beyond human. For humans, the other way to escape from the despair dream was to see through their inner self and overcome the heart's devil. If they failed, then their minds would sink into the dream for eternity, until their physical bodies die off. Yin Kong was trapped in her heart's devil. They were the person and the event that she could never let go. The event in which Zui Kong killed their childhood friends. No matter what the cause was, no matter what the truth was, it had become a fact. So what if he had a reason? Those friends could never return to life. Yin Kong fought Zui Kong while troubled by her feelings. Her admiration had turned into hatred. Yet, within the hatred was a hint of hesitation. This was a pointless fight given her condition. Furthermore, Zui Kong was way stronger than her to begin with. Wounds filled her body. Her mind would forever be trapped in this place if the fight continued. Yin Kong slashed the sword at Zui Kong. The sword hit a thin piece of wire. Sparks flew from the impact. While the hit lost the majority of the force, Zui Kong flicked his finger at the side of the blade. A huge force struck Yin Kong's hands. Infinitesimal control could transfer all the force in a hit without any loss in the process and could direct the exerted force. Yin Kong wasn't weak and she also reached the second stage. When the force struck her hands, she slid the sword into the ground to disperse it. Even then, her hands felt sour and numb. Zui Kong did not speak again since they clashed weapons. He maintained a warm-hearted smile on the face, yet his eyes felt cold as ice. It made anyone who looked into his eyes shiver. His attacks were not as sharp as the real person despite being able to block off Yin Kong's attacks at ease. The real Zui Kong would have disarmed Yin Kong by now. What a fool for an assassin to use a sword like a warrior. Especially a two-handed sword from the medieval age. Are you still the genius that I know of? The person who was way stronger than everyone since you were a child. Zui Kong flicked the sword away. Yin Kong didn't know if it was an illusion that Zui Kong seemed to have gotten stronger. His strength was growing with each passing second. He also spoke more than before. My dear little cousin. Do you know you have attracted all my attention since we were small? You are the stars to me, you shine with the brilliance of a comet. You are my little apple, I protect and wait for you to grow, then pick you off. You are a once-in-a-millennium genius that descended on the clan. Your strength exceeded everyone's imagination. You have a marvelous baby face and big breasts. Just thinking about obtaining you gets me madly excited. He pointed at his crouch which had stood up. Yin Kong slashed the sword at him. Haha. Zui Kong leaped away from the invisible sword by just a few centimeters. The moment he landed back on the ground, Yin Kong lost track of him. Zui Kong was standing behind her the next instant. Two fingers lightly caressed her throat. But I was wrong. You are not the once-in-a-millennium genius. You can't even beat me. You abandoned the skills of an assassin. You abandoned the way of an assassin. You always hope of obtaining friends and comrades. But assassins don't need comrades. They are merely an obstacle to your path of becoming strong. No wonder your strength has become feeble. You have become a rotten apple after you abandon the way of assassin. Let me kill you, and then your friends so you will meet in hell. Haha. The hand holding Yin Kong's neck gradually transformed into a glove with blades. Its fingers gripped her neck and the blade sliced into her. Tears had stopped coming out. Her eyes looked out of focus like when a person entered the unlock mode. Yet, a closer look would discover the difference. These eyes looked identical to the first time Zhen entered the fourth stage. There were no impurities. The only thing in these eyes was pure killing intent, purer than anything else in the world. No, the way of an assassin is merely killing the target. Whether the weapons are blades, guns, bombs, or fingers, as long as you can kill the target. That's an assassin. The way of an assassin does not exist. Comrades are only obstacles. Without them, I would have died long ago. Only the weak will think of comrades as obstacles. The more fragile the person, the more they feared feelings. And Yin Kong's hands turned into a flurry. She moved in the same unseenable speed as Zui Kong. The next moment, she was standing with a human head in her hand. It was Zui Kong's head. Don't provoke me with what happened to my friends. Even though I once killed two of my friends, I paid the price with the me that I am. You will also pay the price for awakening those who had been dead. So pay with your life. Wang Xia, Ten Yi, and Lu Yu roared as the wrecking ball flew toward them. They were running at their full speed already while carrying Lu Yu. A wind pressure struck their backs and they leaped forward. The ball smashed at the land behind them, missing them by just 1 meter. It left a 2-meter crater on the ground. A direct hit would have merged them with the ground. The three people barely got on their feet when the ball was set in motion again. It was impossible to dodge this one. Wang Xia channeled all the remaining demon energy to his arm. He planned to throw the other two away, but he probably couldn't run. As the ball reached its height, a figure shot out straight from the house. In the second that the ball was falling, It crossed over 100 meters and blocked in front of the three people. By the time Wang Xia, Tenyi, and Lu Yu registered what just happened, the ball had split into halves. The figure ran along the chain toward the truck. Its speed was visible to the bare eyes, yet it crossed distance faster than anything else. The figure dashed into the cab and the window glass exploded after the fact. The Freddy inside this truck died before he could react. The figure then charged at the two other trucks. Without anyone controlling the first truck, it continued driving straight ahead at the three people. They finally woke up and ran toward the house, escaping the truck by a fraction. The truck collided with the wall of the house, stirring up a layer of dust. Wang Xia, Tenyi, and Lu Yu leaned against another wall and breathed heavily. They felt lucky and puzzled after the escape. That figure seemed ever so familiar to them. Yet, it didn't look like Zheng. It must be a member of the team. But who else in this team possessed such incredible close combat strength? Two explosions occurred while they caught up with their breaths. The other two Freddys were probably killed. The three people gasped at this person's strength. The figure ran over and stopped in front of them. They finally got a clear view of her face. She was Yin Kong, who had disappeared. Wang Xia sighed, "That was incredible. I never knew you were so strong when we trained. That speed looked amazing. More than what we imagine of someone from the Assassin's clan." Yin Kong wasn't one who talked much, but she smiled after hearing these words. Yet, those eyes behind the smile felt cold as ice. The three people shivered as though a blade edge was pointing at them. As they carefully looked at her eyes again, those eyes were calm as water again, as they always had been. "What's the situation?" Yin Kong asked Wang Xia with a smile. Wang Xia quickly explained the situation they were in, that Hung was fighting Xian, Freddy was becoming stronger with the gap in Zheng's heart widened, Xian's strength was converging to the real Xian. Yin Kong frowned and muttered, "So this is really a dream. Or else I wouldn't have revived. Now it's up to Zheng. If he can overcome himself, we will still have a chance to leave the dream alive. If he fails, we will die here with him. Xian's strength in the real world?" Yin Kong pondered for a moment, then said to them, "I don't know when we will leave this dream world. Maybe in the next second. Maybe never. It all depends on Zheng. So to prevent my existence being limited to the dream world, I want you to bring some words to Xian. The real Xian." The three looked confused. They didn't know what Yin Kong wants Xian for. This Yin Kong gave them a different feel than the one who didn't talk much and had a cold tone. Though they couldn't tell anything in the short time since they just met again. Yin Kong continued, "Since I revived, that means I didn't really cease to exist. The condition might be harsh. It required emotion to reach a limit in a dream. But I believe Xian can figure a way to achieve it, just like how he self-hypnotizes with his glasses. Let him figure it out. If I can revive O, also report my strength to him. I think he will understand the rest." She let out a breath, then sat on the floor. Her movements were different from how she used to be. However, the situation did not allow the other three to ponder into it. Wang Xia waved his wrist and said, "I have recovered a bit of demon energy, enough to summon bombs. Yin Kong, you can go assist Hung." Yin Kong said with a smile, "No need. If you really arrived at this house when you were running toward the town center, then they would eventually come when they can't beat Qian and have to run. If they manage to beat Qian, they won't need our help. Everything can happen in a dream world. So going to help or not won't change the outcome. Our chance lies on Zheng. He's the key to this movie. If he succeeds, we live. If he fails, we die. Let us quietly wait. We can only wait." Zheng was the key to the mystery of this movie. However, his situation was bleak. Clone Zheng stood up among the shattered dead bodies. Two black bat wings spread from his back. This was his combat form. Zheng knew of how strong their mid-fourth stage was after the genes from their ancient demons awakened, even if this power was accompanied by the heart's demon. The two clashed in this god's dimension. Zheng also entered the fourth stage after witnessing Laura's death. He hadn't reached mid-fourth stage yet, but he had the same bat wings. Clone Zheng's strength was identical to Zheng's memory of him back in Resident Evil. Both were filled with extreme anger and both were in the fourth stage. Zheng suppressed his clone with the use of destruction. The principle of destruction was to fuse two completely different energies inside the body. The result volatility was like splashing water to smoking oil. Fortunately, Zheng had a strong enough body to withstand this power. A normal person would be blasted to pieces the instant they activated destruction. This was an ability that destroyed its enemies and its user. Clone Zheng's strength was based on Zheng's memory of Resident Evil. He was as strong as Zheng remembered. Although he was temporarily in a disadvantageous position due to destruction, Zheng also could not damage him. That black flame negated the force Zheng exerted on him, even when this force was powerful enough to smash through steel tens of centimeters thick. Each time the flame swept toward Zheng, his instincts could sense the looming danger and his body reacted on its own. He just couldn't defeat his clone no matter how strong his destruction pushed him. Furthermore, Clone Zheng was getting closer to mid-fourth stage as time went on. "I can't maintain destruction anymore if this continues. He would be able to one-shot me once destruction wears off. My only chance is to enter mid-fourth stage, but if my consciousness falls to my heart's devil, we probably won't be able to leave the dream world." The black flame whirled around Zheng while he was not focused on the fight. The black sword sliced toward him. Fortunately, his reaction speed and movement speed during destruction were much higher than Clone Zheng, so he was able to block the attack with Tiger's Soul. Numbness spread on his hands. This power was on par with his power in destruction. I can't wait anymore, I have to go all out. Zhen made up his mind. He had no other choice but to enter the mid-fourth stage. He slowly merged with that boundless freedom. It was as though the world had turned into nirvana. However, his body inherited the vengeful intent from his genes. The wings and horns depicted him in the image of a demon. The two demons clashed together. The dream world was in a chaos. Freddy dragged everyone who had a gap in their hearts into the despair dream. All the stronger members were revived by Zheng, so Freddy chose his consciousness as the foundation of the dream. Tenyi and the newbies had no power to fight him. With Xian being replaced by a fake, Team China had to face two powerful enemies. Hung and Cheng Xiao's hearts beat violently as they ran. Was the real Xian actually so strong? The confusion grew in their minds. The Xian who was chasing after them possessed unparalleled power. The Lambda driver almost felt overpowered. Luckily, fake Xian had not reached the same level as real Xian. His accuracy decreased when he used Lambda driver. That was how Hung and Cheng Xiao managed to escape. Xian chased after the two. His speed did not appear fast, but the distance between them never increased. When Hung and Cheng Xiao came out of a building, he fired a few shots at them. An invisible layer covered the gauze bullets. Due to the lack of accuracy, the bullets struck a tall building next to them. A uniquely colored light burst out from the bullets as they came in contact with the wall. The light spread ripples and followed the bullets into the building. Explosions came one after another from within the building. In a final, loud explosion, the bullets cut through the whole building and then continued flying hundreds of meters, shattering anything on its way. That power was beyond what words could describe. Hung and Cheng Xiao nearly died in fright when they looked back. The Lambda driver was stupidly overpowered. If the bullets hit their bodies, they would turn into ashes in an instant. The dragon's hard necklace and even a real dragon wouldn't be able to withstand a shot. Hung. Hurry up and shoot, dude. Cheng Xiao turned his head back and ran at full speed. Hung was also running at his full speed. His physical stats were higher than Cheng Xiao, so he ran a little bit faster. I can't shoot when the time isn't up yet. You have to or we are done. It's going to be weak if I shoot now. We should wait until it's up. The two ran for another 100 meters when a shockwave blew past them on the side. A whole section of the street vanished. Hung and Cheng Xiao met eyes with each other. Hung muttered, "Do you feel his accuracy has increased?" There was no reply. Cheng Xiao put all his energy on his feet and pulled ahead of Hung in an instant. Hung confirmed his guess. This Xian's strength was converging to the real Xian's, which also meant that Zheng's gap was growing bigger. Who would be the one to stop Xian? 10 seconds passed and another shockwave blew by. It had gotten nearer to the two, but there was nothing else the two could do. Judging by the power of these shots, Xian did not use the Lambda driver's full power in their training. Even back then they could not get close to Xian. The power of the Lambda driver could mold to the user's will. It could take the form of a shield or spear. There was no way they could break through Xian's shield. And when Xian didn't need to aim in such close distance, the power of the Lambda driver would blast their bodies. Hung counted as he ran. They were not without a chance. The Lambda driver was strong, but so was his lightning shot. The victor of this fight would be determined in an instant. He would win if he could fire the shot before Xian's mind turned defensive. 37 more seconds, damn it. Can we survive 37 more seconds? 34, 33. Hung and Cheng Xiao knew they were dancing on the tip of a blade. Once Xian gained the power to use gun kata and the Lambda driver simultaneously, there was no way they could live. At this rate, Xian's accuracy would converge to gun kata level in 20 seconds. They would get blasted into ashes in at most 25 seconds. Cheng Xiao, this movie is also an opportunity. With danger comes opportunity. I don't know how you come out from your heart's devil, but I know myself. I will never fear anyone again. My weakness has gone. I can go anywhere I want in this world. Hung suddenly said. Cheng Xiao replied, "My heart's devil was quite funny. I forgot who said it, that the more horny a person is, the more they fear the betrayal of their mate. People with the biggest gaps in their hearts are going to have the most difficulty surviving this movie. However, once they overcome their gaps, they will leap through the dragon gate and rise to the heavens." Hung's was technically within top 5 in the team, even higher than Zero. His archery, close-quarter combat, and physical stats were exceptional. Back in Resident Evil, he already possessed the strength to threaten Clone Zheng. However, the flaw in his personality limited his strength to under 40% of its potential. The pain he re-experienced and the breakdown of his heart in this movie allowed him to find himself in whole again. The carp leaps through the dragon gate and rise to the heavens. It was time for Hung to show his potential, or perhaps it was time for Team China to show its potential. His tangling thoughts unwinded. Things he had never considered fell into place, especially the power of his elven bloodline. Hung received some knowledge of the elven bloodline upon his second enhancement. Both charged shot and lightning shot were abilities which gathered all the energy within the bloodline to one shot. This explosive force exceeded even Zheng's destruction. It was the reason the charged shot would knock him out when he only had the first enhancement, and the lightning shot would weaken him drastically. If I can gather the energy on my body instead of the arrow while also reducing the amount of energy, maybe I can use an ability similar to explosion and destruction. Hung jumped onto a wall nearby and ran up the building. He knew he did not have the time to wait for another lightning shot. He had to fight for his life if he wanted to live. Life and death were merely separated by a thin string. His hypothesis was never verified, but he had no other choice. Death could come with whichever decision he made, so he might as well put his luck on the test. Fortune favored Hung this time. Hung activated the focus state of mind ability and entered the unlocked mode. A scan of the surroundings printed into his head. He also felt the flow of energy residing in his body. It was just then Hung realized he had grown so much. He was too unmanly and sent such power to waste. He had decided to revive his lover once he returned and then live on courageously. Though the goal right now was to survive. Hung slowly gained control of his energy. It was enormous and had a cooling sensation. The energy had resided in his body like water, but he simply never noticed it. Using this energy, Hung ran straight up along the wall. Cheng Xiao dropped his jaw as he stared at Hung running up a wall. Hung's speed wasn't too fast, but it appeared as though he defied gravity. When he charged at Xian with a shout, Cheng Xiao yelled, "Shit, you lost your mind. Come back." A shockwave blasted the ground 7 meters next to Cheng Xiao. The resulting wind blew him away. By the time Cheng Xiao came back on his feet, Hung had already clashed with Xian. Hung did not get one-shotted as Cheng Xiao had expected. The fight was actually even, although it appeared that the scale would soon tip toward one end. Hung was approaching Xian by running on the walls of buildings. As he came within 100 meters, he leaped toward the street. A bullet struck where his feet were on. The bullet emitted the same unique color, and then a shockwave blasted a 100-meter section of the street into ruins. Hung leaped out from 8 meters above the ground. While he was in mid-air, he drew the silver bow with 3+4 enchanted arrows. The power of the 3-arrow explosive shot with these enchanted arrows surpassed even the Gauss sniper rifle. If this shot hit, Xian would definitely get killed. I have to hit. He's using lambda driver, which means he can't use gun kata at the same time. This is an opportunity for the explosive shot to complete acceleration. I can do it. I can. A fall from 8 meters high would injure him, but Hung had no time to worry about the aftermath. All his attention was focused on the 3 arrows. The energy from his elven bloodline also flew toward the arrows. If I quantify my energy to 500, the lightning shot uses 400, which is why I can only use it once. However, 100 energy is energy to kill a target. I can fire 5 shots by conserving energy, or I can use the remaining 400 energy after a shot to enhance my body. Hung was still gliding in the air through the force from the leap. Time through his senses had slowed down until he almost felt he had halted in the air. Xian raised his pistol. Hung could see that needle-like bullet slowly moving toward him and then flew past from 4 meters away. Xian's finger had just completed the motion of pulling the trigger. Now. Hung gave a shout as he released the arrows from his fingers. The arrows collided consecutively on their way until only one remained in flight. Its speed reached a degree where the human eyes couldn't catch. By the time Hung's fingers left the bowstring, the arrow had struck Xian's chest. The force was pushing Xian back along the street. Yet, the arrow did not actually pierce into Xian. The uniquely colored light that was on the bullets radiated between his body and the arrow, stopping it at 10 centimeters from his body. The light's intensity grew until Hung could see a barrier completely enveloped Xian. The force from the lambda driver blocked the 3-arrow explosive shot. Despite the barrier, the arrow continued to push Xian back. The explosive shot technique did not simply sum up the forces from 3 arrows. Its force was equivalent to 3 arrows squared. The final arrow ever so slowly pierced into the barrier for 2 centimeters before it was shattered. Seeing that the shot wasn't completely ineffective, Hung knew the lambda driver wasn't invincible, at least not until fake Xian reached real Xian's power. As these thoughts flew through his mind, he crashed into a shop and left human-shaped hole on the wall. Cheng Xiao witnessed Hung blasting Xian away. The sound from the crash brought his mind back to the present. He immediately ran toward Hung and cried excitedly, "Dude, that was impressive. You one-shot the fake Xian. Was that the lightning shot? Hey, did you kill yourself from the crash?" Just as Cheng Xiao ran 10 meters, a shockwave shot out from where Xian was knocked to. This shockwave blasted into the shop Hung crashed into and pulverized the shop in an instant before continuing its way for another 100 meters. A ruin of the shop remained. Hung was probably crushed in the blast. Cheng Xiao's mind stopped for 3 whole seconds before he cried in madness. He ran at full speed and shouted, "Hung. You dead? Answer me if you are dead so I can know." The two of them had fought together in the movie worlds and exchanged their minds. The relationship cultivated was equivalent to that of comrades. So Cheng Xiao lost himself when Hung might have been killed. Xian did not fire another shot afterward. Cheng Xiao was digging through the ruins and throwing out the larger pieces. Finally, he found a silver bow buried underneath. He rushed over and gave the bow a pull. Coming up along with the bow was Hung, who was holding onto the bow tightly. Cheng Xiao pulled Hung out of the pebbles to see his legs had been crushed. If another shockwave arrived at this time, there was no way Hung could run. Cheng Xiao threw Hung on his back and began to run. However, Hung quickly yelled, "Don't. We won't escape by running. We have to counterattack." "Counter your ass. Not even that powerful shot could break through his barrier. Running up to him is only going to get myself killed. Let's just run first. I will stop your bleeding with the needles." Cheng Xiao continued running while he yelled back. Hung said to him in a serious tone, "Trust me. His accuracy is becoming more accurate with each shot. We won't be able to dodge a few more shots. It's better to take the risk than dying without attacking back." The 3-arrow explosive shot carved a slim crack in his defense. What if it's the 4-arrow explosive shot? The force of the explosive shot technique increased at an exponential rate with each additional arrow. A normal person could reach 2 arrows only with great determination and innate talent. Even with the enhancements in stats from this realm, Hung had to practice with his blood in God's dimension every break. His personality might be weak, but he had the determination to practice until his fingers break. That was how he reached top 5 within the team, only appearing useless due to his weakness. When he overcame this weakness, all the efforts he had put in would surface. Each level of the explosive shot is extremely difficult to grasp. The 2-arrow shot only requires controlled collision of the arrows. The 3-arrow shot needs a completely different technique to achieve. Its difficulty is at least 10-folds of the 2-arrow shot. The 4-arrow shot needs yet another different technique and is 100-folds more difficult than the 3-arrow shot. To let you know the truth, I don't know if I can do it or not. I have practiced and practiced in God's dimension ever since I leveled up my elven bloodline. I can achieve the 4-arrow shot 5 out of every 100 times. Within these 5 times, only one will hit the target. Cheng Xiao shouted back, "What, are you kidding? That's 1% chance. We don't even know if it can break his barrier. And we will be done if he got us with his attack." Hung did not change his mind. "No. We must succeed. We will either succeed or die. There's no other path to take." The 3-arrow shot broke into his barrier. The 4-arrow shot will definitely pierce through. Believe in me. The me that I am will definitely hit it. I will definitely pierce that barrier. The legendary archery technique that shot down the suns was the same technique. Cheng Xiao stopped his feet in the center of the street. He looked out to Xian, who was barely visible from the distance. Cheng Xiao yelled to Hung, "If you insist up to this point, I have no other choice but to believe in you. We are comrades, Hung, let us place a bet. We will stand here and he won't hit us with this shot. You won't be able to shoot if I am dodging while carrying you. So I will stay here. The moment he fires, I will throw you up. Then you shoot that whatever 4-arrow shot at him. If he hits us, we are dead. Your shot fails, we are dead. Damn it. I am a fucking retard to take this bet with you, Hung. My life is in your hand." Hung tightened his grip of the silver bow without saying a word in reply. He stared at the figure in the distance. 200 meters away, Xian was walking toward them. The 3-arrow explosive shot did absolutely no damage to him, not even a scratch. The Lambda driver possessed a strict limitation. However, its power was nearly flawless in both offense and defense. This fake Xian was like a symbol of invincibility. Hung and Cheng Xiao both took a deep breath. They watched as Xian raised his pistol. Cheng Xiao threw Hung up at once. At the same time, a shockwave blasted toward them and passed by just 2 meters from their side. The wind generated by the shockwave sent Cheng Xiao flying for over 10 meters. He knocked his head on the ground. Luckily, this wind did not affect Hung, who was in the air, as much. He entered that absolute focus state again. His mind and energy were focused on the 4 arrows in his fingers. Everything in his eyes vanished, only Xian remained. I have to hit. I have to hit, I have to hit. There are a lot of things I have to do. I have to repay her, revive her, and our future I have to hit. The 4 arrows finally left the bow. They collided with each other consecutively until 1 arrow remained. The arrow seemed to have lost its traces in the visible world. It felt as though time had stopped, and the world was frozen. Only the arrow continued flying toward Xian's chest. Bang. The arrow collided with the uniquely colored barrier. Hung and Cheng Xiao's gazes were fixed on the arrow. Everything happened in just an instant. The arrow forced itself through the barrier. 1 centimeter. 2 centimeter. The two felt that they could see the whole process as the arrow pierced through the barrier and into Xian's chest. It carried Xian flying and smashed into a building. Cheng Xiao immediately ran toward where Hung was falling down and caught him before he hit the ground. He cried excitedly, "Nice, you got him. We finally killed him. You broke the power of faith." Hung panted heavily and said in a hurried tone, "Run. That shot was probably very weak after it broke through the barrier. I don't even know if it could damage him. I think the shot is only going to delay him for a bit. Let's run. We have to meet up with the others first. Somehow, I have a sense that they could defeat the Xian." Cheng Xiao put Hung on his back and ran. Behind them, the building that Xian collided into collapsed. Nothing moved for a while. It really appeared that Xian had been killed. A long time passed after Cheng Xiao and Hung left. The collapsed building exploded. Xian stood in the center of the explosion. His face was pale and an arrow was halfway into his chest. Yet, the shot didn't kill him after all, as the barrier blocked off most of the force. Xian pulled the arrow off his chest and threw it onto the ground without glancing at it. +4 enchanted arrows had a corrosive property. So the flesh near the wound began to corrode, similar to being poured sulfuric acid. His face showed no sign, feeling just like the real Xian. Then he ran after Cheng Xiao and Hung with the 2 gauze pistols in hand. Wang Xia, Ten Yi, and Lu Yu were having an unusually easy time at the moment. Yin Kong's strength suddenly grew so much that she was slaughtering Freddy like pigs. Freddy had been killed over 10 times outside the house. Unpiloted trucks and tanks were parked outside. Wang Xia asked curiously, "You are strong. I never knew you are so strong, even though we trained together. I think you can even beat Zheng if you ambush him with this speed." Yin Kong smiled, showing a completely different temperament from her usual coldness. She looked like the girl next door if not for the occasional coldness from within her pupils. If you described her as an assassin with a handsome metrosexual face, she was now expressing a womanly glamour. The three men couldn't help but peep at her. This is troublesome. Yinkong shook her head and sighed as she looked to the sky. We are really going to die if this continues. Don't know if that stupid Zheng see through the truths of this movie or not. Wang Xia asked, truth? What truth? Isn't it overcoming the gap in your heart? Yinkong nodded, that is one of the truths. Everyone's gap is different. If this movie is really built upon Zheng's consciousness like Tenyi said, then Freddy is going to target the one thing he won't let go in addition. The thing he won't let go. Yes. Yinkong said with a smile. For him, it should be something very simple, to live on, whether himself or the team. This is the desire that has supported him to go on ever since he entered God's realm. Yet, this same desire to live on is now his biggest enemy. If he fails to see through himself, he and us will all be wiped in this world. Of course, Xian will probably be the only person to return since he hasn't entered the dream world. No wonder no one makes it out of a nightmare on Elm Street alive. The other three people followed Yinkong's gaze to the sky. A small dot loomed in from THD distance. Lu Yu asked, what's that? Helicopter. Yinkong rubbed his hair. The men cried, helicopter. Right. Armed helicopter. As the dot was getting nearer and nearer to the house, their expressions changed. It was indeed an armed helicopter. When the helicopter reached within 1,000 meters, a missile flew toward them. Wang Xia, Tenyi, and Lu Yu cried while they ran. However, it was too late to dodge. Yinkong though stood in place. She's actually not bad. She wasted the power of the fourth stage in this body, but her talent is not less than mine. I couldn't think of this shining attack. Yinkong looked at the incoming missile with indifference. Her hands and arms suddenly blurred. This was Yinkong's self-created ability to slash the sword with the high speed of the shining. The resulting airwave attack could reach up to 100 meters. Wang Xia, Tenyi, and Lu Yu opened their mouths and eyes wide. They saw Yinkong's arms and a large area in front of her began to warp like the bending of light around a fire. The warping advanced forward and in an instant, collided with the missile. The missile exploded, but the warping even carried this explosion 100 meters further away before stopping. Amazing. The three men gasped. Tenyi and Wang Xia were also suspicious. They had seen Yinkong use the shining airwave, but that power was definitely far away from this attack. Its range also did not extend up to 200 meters. If I can use this ability to its fullest potential, the range should be at least 500 meters. This body isn't strong enough. It had been dead for so many years after all. The unlocked mode also only goes up to the lowest level of 4th stage. It's up to Xian now. Hope he has a way to make me alive again. Yinkong looked at the men with a smile and said, I suddenly want to live. There are some things only the living can do. Death takes all the burden away, but you also won't be able to do anything, whether it is to weep or repay for your sin. Even suffering will only continue when you are alive. No one understood what Yinkong meant. They thought she was expressing her feeling toward the desperate situation they were in, so no one said anything in reply. The party fixed their eyes at the incoming helicopter. The helicopter stopped at 1,000 meters away and then fired another air-to-ground missile. After Yinkong blasted the missile with the airwave again, Wang Xia said, can the airwave reach further? The helicopter is about 1,000 meters away. Yinkong's eyes remained cold as ice and sharp as a blade. She replied with a smile, it can't hit so far. But if I throw the sword up? Her arm moved with a throwing action. They did not see anything being thrown, but they knew she had thrown the invisible sword. It might have been an illusion. Wang Xia and Tenyi thought they saw black ancient characters surfaced on Yinkong's arm. In just a blink of an eye, her arm returned to normal and they thought their eyes just lost focus for that moment. At the same time, the front window on the helicopter exploded as if something smashed the helicopter from the front. The helicopter wavered for a few seconds until it finally dropped to the ground. The helicopter exploded in a loud boom. See? All good now. It's an armed helicopter this round. If we continue to stay in this world, he will eventually come back with a force that not even I can fight against. Yinkong said. When the time comes, we are dead. The three who were in an excitement after witnessing Yinkong easily shot down a helicopter side. Freddy was growing more powerful by the second. Who could tell how powerful he would get? What if 10, 100, 1,000 armed helicopters swarmed them? Yinkong was going to say something when she suddenly looked to the distance. The men's eyes followed. In the open space far away, Cheng Xiao was carrying Hung on his back and running toward them. He could barely catch his breath. Yinkong. Haha. I saw my Yinkong. There was no overreaction from Yinkong as she used to had. Her smile remained warm and gentle, and so was those cold eyes. As the two people approached, she flashed over to behind their backs. Cheng Xiao and Hung were both surprised. Hung immediately turned his vision around while raising his bow to aim. However, Yinkong put her hand on the bow and said, good, it's Hung and Cheng Xiao. Sorry, I have to test you in case you are afraid. That's the right thing to do anyway. Cheng Xiao said, I don't know why, but I suddenly find myself liking you more than before. Is the gap in your heart a lack of feminine attractiveness? And you gained it when you overcame it. Yinkong winked at him. Cheng Xiao was completely stunned, and in the next second, he was flying backward. He fell on the ground after flying for 10 meters, then immediately jumped back up. Judging by how he was only rubbing his butt, Yinkong had controlled her force. Hung wasn't injured, so she grabbed a hold of him before knocking Cheng Xiao away. So Xian has gotten so powerful already? Yin Kong asked. Cheng Xiao was putting his full attention on piercing needles onto Hung's legs. Hung clenched his teeth at the tingling sensation, then replied with a bitter smile, "That's probably not even Xian's real strength. I can feel his power is still growing. Furthermore, he still can't use gun kata and the lambda driver at the same time. Otherwise, we would have been dead." "Is that so?" Yin Kong blinked her eyes and suddenly laughed. "We will leave the 4-arrow explosive shot for next time. Can you show me the 3-arrow shot? I want to see its power." Hung looked at his fingers. All 5 fingers were red and swollen. The 4-arrow explosive shot damaged his tissues. He had to heal every time he practiced this shot in God's dimension. So even though Yin Kong requested it, he wasn't in the condition to use even the 2-arrow shot. Cheng Xiao stabbed 2 needles into his arm and wrist. He twirled the needles and said, "Dude, it's impolite to refuse a beautiful girl's request. Not to mention a big breast's baby face." Yin Kong knocked his head with a giggle. Cheng Xiao was overjoyed and reached out for her little hand, but at the next moment, he was flying again. Though he quickly got up and ran back like a cockroach. Hung paid no attention to Cheng Xiao. He circulated the nearly depleted energy in his body. The swelling had subsided in just 10 seconds after stimulation from the needles and his energy, which enabled him to use his bow for a brief period. He placed 3+4 enchanted arrows on the bow and fired at a big tree 1,000 meters away. Pop pop. The arrows collided midway. The final arrow accelerated to a speed that not even Yin Kong could catch with her eyes. That smile on her face turned to a more serious expression because the arrow cut the tree in half and continued flying for several thousand meters. Not even this 3-arrow explosive shot could break the lambda driver's barrier. Yin Kong sighed. Hung nodded. The theory behind the explosive shot is to merge the forces of multiple arrows into one through collision. The final arrow's force grows exponentially by the number of arrows. However, gun kata is probably a counter to this technique. It does not rely on his eyes to catch the arrows. The calculated shots in every direction tend to shoot down the arrows before collision. I could only use this shot when he was unable to use gun kata. If he's still alive, he probably gained the power to use both gun kata and lambda driver. By now I won't be able to hit him anymore even if I can use the 4-arrow explosive shot again. Neither Cheng Xiao nor Hung wanted to have Yin Kong fight Xian after they witnessed Xian's power. Yin Kong was a strong fighter in the team, but her chance of winning was almost non-existent. The only person stronger than this Xian at the moment was only Zheng. Yin Kong nodded then stopped talking. She sat there and waited. The other 5 people began to discuss a way to beat Xian. The stronger the power, the more restrictions it has. Xian in the real world is definitely not an issue. I just have to wait for the 5 minutes of lambda driver to be over and I can kill him in an instant. However, without this time limit, is the Xian in this world invincible? The series of attacks that came one after the other nearly overwhelmed all the members' non-related thoughts. Now that Xian and Freddy seemed to have disappeared, the team suddenly found themselves a few minutes of peace. The 5 men gradually stopped talking as they sensed the atmosphere was changing. This might be the tranquility before the storm. Once this tranquility ended, the storm would arrive. Zheng was still battling his clone. It had been over 2 minutes since he activated destruction. Using the ability for such a long time was self-destruction. And even with the optimization of his body through the 4th stage, he was at his limit. The breakdown of his body had begun. Qi and blood energy were depleted. Zheng was crossing the line to despair. In contrast to him, clone Zheng appeared at ease as he had been throughout the battle. He barely held up against the speed from destruction. However, Zheng couldn't break through his defense no matter how much he accelerated or increased his strength. Clone Zheng would always block that next attack. 2 minutes passed but not once did he put damage on Clone Zheng. Clone Zheng had nearly perfect control over his black flame. It moved like it was bestowed life and blocked off attacks as if it was a solid object. Every strike that Zheng put on the flame burned himself in return. These wounds added up to numerous on Zheng. He no longer possessed the power to rival his clone. Yet, Zheng never ceased his attacks of madness. His consciousness had reached the boundary of freedom after he forced himself into the mid-4th stage. Neither pain, damage, or breakdown could trigger a response from him. The heart's devil overtook him. He would use destruction until his body could no longer maintain it even without fighting clone Zheng. The only outcome set in front of Zheng was death unless he overcame himself. Perhaps this is the end. Zheng sighed. His consciousness was getting lost and his body was beginning to fall apart. Yin Kong stood up and said to the rest of the team with a smile, "Run. Run as far as you can." Of course, running might be useless as long as Zheng is still trapped in his despair dream. The men were confused. Hung looked to the street abruptly. On the end of the street was a man floating wobbly toward them. His feet were half a meters above the ground. As the man neared, Hung finally saw his face. It was Xian with a pale white face. The power of the lambda driver allowed him to float. He seems terribly injured. A critical wound on the chest and heavy loss of blood. Otherwise, he wouldn't waste energy like this. His movements are supported by the lambda driver at this point. Hung said. The other men didn't have the good side of Hung. They only recognized the man was Xian and couldn't see the details. Yin Kong on the other hand nodded in agreement. Xian had his head lowered. If it wasn't for his chest still expanding and contracting ever so slightly, he could be mistaken for a corpse. If everything in this world is based off Zheng's mind, this Xian won't have any feelings or senses. Which means he won't stop no matter how fatal his wounds are. We might be able to use delay tactics to kill him even when he has unrestricted use of the lambda driver. Yin Kong breathed out then turned to the others. Let's run. He doesn't move fast. We can run at this pace. Just as she finished speaking, she raised her head and laughed bitterly. She sensed 4 armed helicopters were coming from far away. It was definitely Freddy coming back again. Xian and Freddy were closing in on the house from both directions. It was only 2 seconds before the rest of the team noticed the abnormality. They all looked up at the sky and saw the helicopters. The house was surrounded by an open area, so if they left the house, they would become visible targets under the helicopters unless Yin Kong could quickly take them down. Don't bother dreaming. I can shoot down one with the sword, but what about the other 3? Can Hung shoot them down in a short amount of time? Yin Kong said. Hung put up his arm and said, I can't. The 2-arrow explosive shot is my limit. I can fire 1 or 2 more shots with no guarantee of accuracy. It's already a miracle that my arm still moves. Hung was better suited for the situation than Yin Kong. Yet, he had basically lost the ability to fight. A chill crept into their hearts as they realized this place might be the end of their lives. Yin Kong's hands twitched slightly. She suddenly had the thought of running on her own. No one could stop her unless Freddy gained the use of nuclear weapons. She was safe in this world. However, the rest of the team would be declared dead once she left. Yin Kong's consciousness showed sign of waking up with this thought. What troublesome. Yin Kong murmured. She charged at Xian like a stream of light at a speed approaching the shining activation. Her reaction speed was clearly able to support the speed unlike before. Yin Kong's speed was becoming faster, but her body was becoming more visible to the bare eyes. These two phenomenons contradicted with each other. When Yin Kong reached within 100 meters of Xian, he struggled to raise his hand. A light field appeared in between two. This happened in merely an instant and Yin Kong had already crossed another 50 meters. The light then blasted toward Yin Kong and consumed her. It continued blasting forward until the stirred up dust covered the light. The dust settled several seconds later, exposing a canal 100 meters in length and 10 meters in width on the path the light traveled. This was merely from the rays of Xian's arm. He might have surpassed Zheng at this point. The team members thought to themselves. The shot didn't hit Yin Kong. No one knew what kind of speed she had that dodged the attack. Yin Kong used the shining air waves. The waves flew near to half a meter from Xian and then straight up vanished. An attack that struck down missiles couldn't even go near Xian. The Lambda driver's defense has no weak points for close-range assassination. I stabbed over 100 times already. The airwaves are also useless. That attack can reach the power of the 4-arrow explosive shot, but can this body sustain the cost? Yin Kong stopped the airwaves attacks then circled around Xian with her speed advantage. She couldn't break through his defense, but neither could he attack her when even raising his arm was a difficult task. That was the reason Yin Kong hesitated in using that attack. The light surrounding Xian exploded while she hesitated and took away her chance to use the attack. Yin Kong felt the air solidified and she was frozen in place. The light from the Lambda driver had spread beyond her, which meant she was within attack range. Converging to the Xian in reality, does that include intelligence? Time did not allow her to think further. A huge force carried her flying back. This force was streaming out from Xian continuously in such quantity that her body began to tear apart. She was the boat floating in an ocean that was moved by the waves. Her life was on the brink of death as the power of faith carried her toward the house. Yin Kong could even see the look of terror on the other 5 people's faces. Is this the end? Is this the end? Zero stared out the window at the 2 dead bodies of his family, his mother and brother. Is this the end? Zero had forgotten when did he first ask himself this question. From the change that happened to his family, in the struggles he went through and in his training, in his journey as an assassin, Zero asked himself time and time again, is this the end? All the people he had met praised him as a natural-born assassin. He was calm, indifferent, and cool. His reliability and silence were the must-have traits of an assassin. He had everything needed. He was indifferent to human lives. People believed he was born to be an assassin. He could kill anyone without fear. Yet, did he really have no fear? Could he truly kill anyone? Zero knew the question to these 2 questions. He wanted revenge on the woman who betrayed his father. But he was scared to see this woman who still clinged onto life and gave herself to an enemy. And yet, why did he feel so empty and awful when he learned of her death? There was also his brother. It was time for the end to come. Zero chose to kill himself once he finished what he had to do. He had lost the desire to live. Never did he expected to move from the real world to this world. Here, he met Zheng who wanted to live on no matter what it costed, Xian who possessed the utmost intelligence, Hung who was both strong and weak, Yin Kong who was cold and handsome. Everyone had their story and a heartbroken past. His story was nothing extraordinary. He found his kind. He realized he was simply lonely. Every night since the day he left his family, he wished to hear the laughter of his father and the soft voice of his mother again. Loneliness was the only thing that remained once his family was stripped from him. This loneliness carried him through the journey of revenge, the same loneliness that took his life. I won't be alone again, Zero muttered. Zero was standing on the 2nd floor of the house after he shot the 2 girls. The 2 dead bodies turned into his mother and brother as they fell to the ground. Then Freddy surfaced behind him. Freddy halted the claw that was reaching for Zero's neck for a moment from hearing those words. He opened his mouth and uttered a syllable when a gun barrel slid into the mouth. Zero's voice followed, I won't ever be alone again. Mother's death and falling in love with my brother made me want to die, but that has lies in the past. I have too many things I can't let go now. They are waiting for my return. I want to live on. I want to fight with them together. I don't want to be alone. I want to be with my team. When Yinkong closed her eyes in resign, the sound of gunshot echoed to her ears loud as thunder. Her body collapsed on the ground with the force going away. A burning pain covered her back. That moment of contact with the power of the lambda driver torn away a section of skin and flesh on her back. However, that did not hinder her movements. She flipped up from the ground and immediately turned to Xian with caution. To Yinkong's surprise, Xian's body was crumbling along with the light around him. She thought the power of the lambda driver overloaded his body at first, but then turned around to look at the house. On the second floor was a young man kneeling on the floor with a sniper rifle in hand. It was Zero who had disappeared. The escape from death overjoyed everyone here. Yet, before they got the chance to talk to Zero, the helicopters fired their air-to-ground missiles. Hung couldn't use any strength, Yinkong was critically injured, and Zero had just used the mystic eyes of death perception. No one even had the strength to run. What awaited them in the end was still death. Fake Xian is dead. It's up to you now, Zheng. Team China's future lies on whether you can overcome yourself. Seeing the incoming missiles, Yinkong and everyone here quietly closed her eyes. There were only a few seconds left until the missiles reached the ground. Neither time nor space existed in a dream. Zheng's energies depleted before his body reached its limit. The moment he exited out of destruction and had no strength, Clone Zheng grabbed his neck and lifted him from the ground. It's the end. Clone Zheng tightened his grip. Zheng did not have the strength to struggle. His mind was becoming dizzy. It was a matter of 2 or 3 more seconds before he lost consciousness and killed. Perhaps it was the final reflection before death, or the lack of strength couldn't support the 4th stage anymore. Zheng returned from his heart's devil the second before losing consciousness. As the boundary of freedom disappeared, pain flooded him. Even without the suffocation, he couldn't know if he could continue on with this body. Clone Zheng relaxed his grip when he saw Zheng move his mouth. Zheng took several breaths with the chance, then said with a cracked voice, "You are in pain, right?" Clone Zheng asked in confusion, "What nonsense are you talking? Are you looking to die faster? I won't let you. You will die slowly from suffocation." Zheng smiled bitterly, but the grip on his neck stopped the movement on his cheek. He said, "Even though I was fighting you under the influence of the heart's devil, but I got a clearer sense into your heart. You hate me. You hate this world. You hate all living beings. You want to destroy or be destroyed. I think I understand you. I will go through the same changes if I encountered the same thing. You are me after all." Clone Zheng opened his lips, but no words came out. His grip tightened again. Zheng continued, "I was too naive. I want everyone to live, but the person that I really want to live is me. I only have the power to survive this world with everyone alive. The truly selfish person is the inner me. How ironic, you want to die and I want to live. Yet, you are the one who kills me. The clone me, chi and blood energy allows me to use destruction, but let me tell you of the third energy residing in my body." A white light radiated from Tiger's soul and his hand. The light forced Clone Zheng to let go of him. Zheng used his refined chi and activated the light blade. Zheng did not attack. He said, "My consciousness received the feelings you emitted during the fight: anger, despair, defeat, and death of the heart. I finally realized the gap between the two of us. One will only gain when he's willing to give up some things. I was too fixed on surviving and had all these hesitation. I didn't want anyone to die, but witnessed my comrades dying in front of me. I didn't want to hurt innocent people, but the same people die because of our missions. I don't possess the power to carry out my goals, whether it's to live on, to protect those important to me, or to repay you. I didn't want to give up anything, and so I couldn't get anything. Live on, my clone. And wait for our meeting in the real world. I will stand on the same height as you. I will have the power to carry out my justice. Next time, I will bring you out of the suffering abyss." Zheng slashed a cloud of mist with Tiger's soul, then jumped in.